when you do something every single day, it hangs out in your consciousness all day and like your conscious awareness. Think about it like journaling. When you journal every single morning, it starts to compound. You start where you finished yesterday. Your new, like the ceiling becomes the floor. Welcome back to Open Late Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Sfandiari, and I'm coming to you solo this week with some fun stuff. I just previously recorded and realized that I didn't have the sign on and I have these swatches. And then I was like, oh, I have to start over. And then I was like, no, actually, I want to let everybody know that we're doing a little shakeup around here. We're changing the way that we set up the studio. We're getting new chairs. These are the color swatches that we're thinking about going with. So now that you've seen them, I guess we can get going. But, fun stuff. All right. So I think we're going with this, by the way. Anyway, I have a really juicy episode for you all. It's essentially what happened when Pasha and I decided together to have sex every single day while we were on a month-long trip. So I am going to dive in and tell you everything that happened and everything I learned from this experience. But before I do, I want to share something with you all. Sometimes when I do these solos, I read reviews just to highlight people who are listening to the show and how much it is helping you all on your journey into non-monogamy. So this review is from Miggy Mill. Such a healing show. I recommend this podcast to anyone and everyone, regardless of the type of relationship they may seek out. Exposure to different ways of thinking and living is healing because it provides freedom, mental and spiritual. The guests are enticing and so informative. I've learned a lot and I've journaled so much after listening to some of these episodes. Do yourself a favor and give this a listen. Thank you, Miggy Mill. It means so much to me when y'all share, when you DM me your stories and your big breakthroughs and even your hard times. So definitely keep doing it. Don't hesitate to leave questions in your reviews because I will also answer them on the Q&A episodes. So just keep showing up that way because I really love it. So thank you very much. We have a link to review the show in the show notes. And let's get on to my review of having sex every day. This is not going to be a review of how good the sex was, but I'll probably let you guys know some of the highlights. But I want to start with really the reason behind this choice, right? Okay, so you might be asking for someone who's in an open relationship who has a show about sexuality, why did you need a challenge? And it's not really that we needed one. I just had this idea in my head. See, years ago, I read an article written by a woman who said that she decided to have sex with her husband every day for a year. I believe it was like a 365-day commitment, barring either of them being sick or not being in the same place physically. And it always kind of stuck with me. I remember Pasha and I were early on in our relationship when I first read this. And I remember thinking to myself, as we're already having sex every day and it's hot, like, oh, we'll probably never need something like this. Because this couple went from, maybe having sex 4 times a month to it, revitalizing their whole love life. And, when you're having sex every day in the beginning of a relationship for that first, year or two when everything is so spicy still and you have all your hormones and pheromones working for you. And, you don't really need that extra push because you are driven by lust for your partner. And every day for us was not unusual in the beginning. But, we are well beyond a decade since our first kiss. And let me tell you, when you're both building businesses and careers and, managing a lot of different aspects of our lives and building communities, we definitely are in that place where it feels like we want to schedule it in. We want to make date nights important. And, here we are 10 years later, still bringing spice into our relationship in many ways. So, when I knew we'd be traveling together for more than a month, I was like, this is a perfect opportunity to have sex every day. Like that article kind of floated back into my consciousness. And I mean, I'm a pretty competitive person actually, strangely. I like to compete with myself. I love a good challenge. And, Posh and I had gotten to a place at this point where we're having sex between 1 and 3 times a week. And, running multiple businesses, travel a ton where we're not even in the same city a lot, and exhaustion, responsibility, things like that get the best of us. Also, another reason that I wanted to do this is our bodies just don't work the same way they used to. And, truthfully, neither of us have been practicing non-monogamy in a big way either. I would say in the last, year of our relationship, we haven't had many outside partners other than like a fling, a little one night stand, a little travel buddy situation. So, I was thinking this was a perfect way to reignite, kick it into high gear like we're in our 20s again, okay? Um, and I don't want this to sound like we're never in the sack. Frankly, when we do have sex, Pasha and I have amazing connection, intimacy, and neither of us have any trouble climaxing. Let's just say that. So when we do have sex, it's very pleasurable. So I just want people to know that, you might be coming at this from a completely different angle. And we're coming at this from a baseline of the sex that we do have is good. And if you are looking at doing this challenge from a place of wanting to like get better, just know that I thought, okay, like this sex is amazing, but where we got to after doing it for, 20 days straight or whatever have you was like, oh my gosh, I thought that this was amazing, but like we can access this. So just know that wherever you're starting from, if you're like, well, we have great sex already, that's where I thought we were also, and it still is, but the heights. So I just wanted to like plant that little seed. We're going to get to this in a little bit, but we're about to embark on a month-long journey in Asia together. And, Pasha will tell you that he didn't actively agree to this, but he was on board when I brought it up. All right. So here's what I learned. When you do something every single day, you've got to plan it, especially if it requires physical activity. So within the first few days, we realized that if we didn't plan it, it wasn't going to happen until the end of the day. And, we're exploring new places, we're eating great food, like we're walking around all day long in brand new cities. And frankly, when you get to the end of the day, you're tired. And so we were like, okay, let's back it up because we don't want to get stuck like every night feeling sleepy, but then feeling like it's a have to, because that's not a good feeling either. So when you plan it and when you're doing it every day, it becomes a part of this general consciousness that you have. So it's like, okay, realizing also that my body is like really interested in having sex earlier in the day also. So when I started giving myself that, it was like this cool confirmation of like, oh yeah, this is really enjoyable. And we hardly ever do that because it's like, okay, we'll go on a date and have sex. And you fall into a routine. It doesn't like, it's not hard to do, right? To fall into this routine of things when you're home in your own environment. But when you're in a brand new environment, it's inspiring to create newness and get creative with everything that you're doing. So I found myself much more attuned to sex and sexuality throughout the day as well, because we started building on that. We were having it every day. So I was thinking about it more. So that was the first thing I learned. And I noticed that I was getting much more in touch with my body and its rhythms because I was kind of thinking about sex so much more than I do at home. I'm not working, I'm not in my home, I'm not entertaining, I'm not, meeting with friends and family. I'm like really focused on just newness, adventure, travel, which is very sexy in itself. And so I'm feeling into my body. And I think Pasha was doing the same thing. We were noticing, and because we were together without a ton of responsibility, we were telling each other, like, oh, I'm horny now, or I'm feeling it. Like, should we? And then we would talk about like when we were going to do it. Like, if we go back to the room, oh, let's like, before lunch or whatever. Like, do you think we could go back to the room now? And so you're kind of entertaining this idea, and it's creating that, foreplay that Esther Perel talks about. Like, foreplay should start the moment your last orgasm ends. And we were building that. And that was really cool. And I think both of us being so connected to our bodies was such a gift. And we found that early on. The second big thing that came up, and I feel like we learned, was initially like uncomfortable. Initially, it was a bit of like shadow work. It caused us to confront things that we sort of didn't see eye to eye on. Like, first of all, sex means different things to different people. So when we agreed to have sex every day, initially, I think I was imagining, penis and vagina sex. So was Pasha, penetrative. But the more like the days went on, in my mind, I switched it and I was like, oh, yeah, sex is like also just oral, or maybe it's like just intimate connection. You know, if there were times where I wasn't feeling like 100%, whether, crampy, whatever time of the month it is for me, or like really big dinner. And I'm like, I don't know if I was using it to my advantage. Like, no, it doesn't have to be like penetration to count. But it was interesting because we didn't over communicate that. And it's such a good reminder in your relationships. Like, if you leave this room for error, like if you don't over communicate, you could be speaking a completely different language or think that you're talking about the same thing, but you're not, right? And so we kind of thought that sex was two different things, and also came into question, do we have to have climax for it to count, which is so silly. But it was like semantics, because I'm also very competitive. And so there were a few days, I think like maybe 10 days into the trip, where we were in the Philippines and I got a little bit sick, and then Pasha got sick like the day after me. We had a bad stomach bug, and I was like literally stressed because like we weren't going to like stay true to this thing that then felt like a bet. Like, for both of us, actually, we let this pressure build up on it. Like, me, because I wanted it to happen. And I think Pasha felt pressured by me. And the moment that that man, like I said, feels like something is not his choice or his idea, like he's doing this out of his own, you know, autonomy, whatever it is, it's a no-go. And so it caused this like shadow rift for us to obviously talk about these things, because us. So immediately we were like, we're not seeing eye to eye. Let's have these uncomfortable conversations, because we know it's going to lead to more intimacy and us getting even closer. And I think at the end of the day, what we learned was sex can mean anything we want to, as long as we feel connected and we feel like we are both working towards pleasuring the other person in the moment and being present. So it was really cool because it took this unnecessary pressure off for both of us, and it allowed us to continue what was already happening, which was the learnings, the fun, the intimacy growth, all of that. But it was hairy there for a moment, which I think is so valuable, because if you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing. And, I think that there are people who feel like, oh, 10 years into a relationship, you should know everything about your partner. But we're always changing and we're always different people. So we get to come back around and relate to each other in a new way. The next thing that I think is such a big thing that I want to share is I realized that our baseline of intimacy was just increasing. And it got to this place where it was like compounding. As I mentioned earlier, when you do something every single day, it hangs out in your consciousness all day and like your conscious awareness. Think about it like journaling. When you journal every single morning, it starts to compound like morning pages from The Artist's Way. Or when you're in the gym, 6 days a week, 5, 6, 7 days a week, like that, you start where you finished yesterday. Your new, like the ceiling becomes the floor. And when you're doing something, once a week or twice a week or even just 3 times a week, it's like when you come back to it, you kind of start from scratch. So you're just building from the same place. But we were doing it every day. So we were building from the place that we left off yesterday, like training. So our baseline started to be way more creative, because the other thing is, you know, we have great sex. And I think that leads to us at home going into a routine of what we know we like and what works. And it's really fun. And if it's twice a week, that's great. But you don't want to do the same exact thing every single day. So it was causing us to have way more playfulness, way more fun. It has me think of this post. I have to give a shout out to Layla Martin. She posted this reel, and I think it was like the week I was traveling before we started this, and it was like sex based on like a drug. And she kind of did a whole like production where she costumed and musicked and makeup based on different substances. So it was like sex if you were MDMA, or if sex were MDMA. And it was like this version of sex that was like super heart explosive, connected, like serotonin to the max. There was another one that was like, sex if you're marijuana, like if marijuana were sex, how would that, interact? It was very like high and ethereal and like, very breathy. There was another one that was like sex as cocaine. And it was just like, super intense and everything visceral. And I remember like really resonating with this post. So on the trip, I remember being in Singapore, and it's funny because like not my drug of choice at all. If you told me I had to pick between 10 or 15 things, this would be the bottom of the rung. But I was like, sex is cocaine looks fun. And so I remember like putting on like 80s hair rock and getting into like character full on. Like I was like, I'm going to live out my stripper fantasies that I like never did. And we fucked like cocaine. And I didn't even tell Pasha that like that's what I was doing, but that was my intention. And I remember being like, that's the hottest thing that we've done in a while, because I embodied this whole persona and I kept playing with it, because every day you're not just going to fall back on what you were doing yesterday. So needless to say, as we're going about this, our connection is through the roof. When you're really sharing so much energy and space. And I mean, it was obviously helpful that we weren't working. We're on this amazing trip with each other. But it really led to us being super connected in a way that created more patience with each other. We were kinder to one another. We were more easygoing. We were scheduling it in, and we kept having it earlier and earlier because we like didn't want to sacrifice how this time would be. And like I said earlier, I had to check myself for being kind of competitive when we were sick. I was like, oh my gosh, well, we're going to like miss a day. And that learning also reminded me to be way more compassionate, like with myself, with my body. Yeah, it was so wild. Even when Pasha's dad was on a portion of this trip with us, he met us in Singapore, and then we went to Vietnam together. And then when we split in Thailand, like it was such a good reminder that like we're doing this big cool family thing, but also making time for just us and making sure that it was still a priority. I mean, and one of the reasons that we wanted to do this was because we're starting a family this year. And I think building our intimate connection while it's just the two of us still is so important, and I think so valuable, because we are creating that baseline to be stronger and healthier. And speaking of health, I think this is the last big thing that I'll share, is like the crazy amount of health benefits that having sex every day can bring into your life. If you're not already aware, I'll just share some with you. I mean, first of all, sex reduces stress. So, like, if you're having sex a couple times a week, great. But if you're having sex every single day, your stress level can really come down. And I mean, I noticed it right away. And, you might be thinking, well, yeah, you're on vacation, but traveling actually can be very stressful, being in new places, the unknown, the uncertainty of it all. It generally doesn't stress me out. But I think for Pasha, he's like not as much of a like free, willy nilly traveler as I am. And so I noticed both of our stress levels were really low. And the other thing that it does is it boosts your immune system. So, yes, did we still get a little stomach bug in Asia? Sure. I'm pretty sure there is no way to escape that. But it is like the only sick that we got. And I think we just felt so healthy on that trip. Like, we were eating, of course, like out in restaurants all day, every day, because there wasn't really a place to cook ever. And sometimes food can really affect me because I eat pretty clean at home. And I just felt like such an immunity boost. I'm traveling, I'm not taking any of my vitamins that I normally take. Drinking a ton of filtered water, which I prefer to not do that. And I still felt so good. Having sex can also really, really do a ton to improve your sleep. And I felt that on that trip. Obviously, also getting really tired every day, but sex is also a form of exercise. So, I still worked out a lot on this trip, as did Pasha. We got in the gym every time there was a decent one in our hotel, but this was also a nice little way to burn some calories, get your heart rate up, depending on what kind of sex and how long you're doing it for. But the health benefits go on and on. I mean, I won't go into all the studies and the science, but it's been proven to reduce your risk of heart disease, having a heart attack, to reduce the risk of breast cancer in women, to reduce the risk of prostate cancer in men. So, next time you are feeling frisky and feeling horny, just remind yourself that you are also trying to boost your immune system, reduce stress, sleep better at night, guard yourself against cancer, like all the things. Um, I I'm really, really glad we did this challenge. I would love to do it again and just continue, it's like giving yourself a little extra jolt. It's like doing a cleanse, right? You ever like take 30 days off of gluten, or, stop drinking for a month? People do like sober October and you feel so much better after. And you're like, oh, wow, I'm so glad I did that. And then, you kind of slide back into your normal life or your habits. I feel like hopefully me sharing this inspired you to think about doing this. I did a poll on my Instagram. Actually, I remember it was the day that I got to the Philippines. And I asked all of you who are listening, you know, what your ideal was as far as like how often you wanted to have sex. So I asked people how often they were having sex, and the options were like once or twice a week, or I think it was actually like once a month, once a week, multiple times a week, and every day. And, everyone kind of fell on the spectrum, but the majority of people, and it wasn't like a high majority, but it was definitely a majority, were, I think it was 1 to 3 times a week. And then the next question was like, do you wish you were having more sex? And that was a resounding yes. It was like a 77% yes. And then, whatever the balance is, no. And I don't know if there was a third option of um, like, I don't really care. And then I went on to ask people like why they believe that they don't have more sex, like why they, is there a reason? And I got a lot of specifics that were very interesting and insightful. But the cool thing is, most of you want more sex. So maybe take this as an opportunity to go do that. I also wrote a blog about this, so go check that out. It is a lot of this information, but some more stuff sprinkled in there that I might not have shared in this episode. I have linked it in the show notes. And let me know how it goes for you. When I put polls like that on my Instagram, like I'm really interested in what comes back, and it helps shape what I do, what I share. Like it really did actually give me this extra oomph to do this 30-day challenge, because I was like, when I want to do a study on like just human nature and human expression in general, I'm like, oh, I'll do it first. I'll see how it works for me, and I'll come back and report to all of you. So thank you for being a part of this with me. And like I said, let me know how it goes. If you decide to feel the call and like do this challenge for yourself, don't hesitate to write in and let me know what you are learning about yourself and your partnership. As always, don't forget to subscribe to the show so that it is already in your inbox. You don't have to waste any time downloading it. And I will see you all next time.